My husband laughed when he told his friends I was worthless 3 weeks later. His boss stood in front of him and said, "Meet your new owner." My husband turned white, because the woman standing beside his boss was me. My name is Natalie, and I had been married to Ryan for 6 years. Ryan worked for a construction company called Westbrook Development. He loved telling people he was one of the company's most important managers. At home, though, he treated me like I was lucky to have him. I worked from our spare bedroom, doing bookkeeping for small businesses. Ryan called it my little hobby. I never argued. I just kept working. Then, one Friday night, Ryan invited several coworkers to our house. I cooked dinner for everyone. While I was carrying plates into the dining room, I heard Ryan laughing. His coworker asked, "Does your wife actually make money?" Ryan laughed. "Not enough to matter." Everyone chuckled. Then he added, "Honestly, if I left tomorrow, she'd have nothing." I stood behind the kitchen door, holding a tray. My hands were shaking, but I didn't walk in. I quietly put the tray down. That night, after everyone left, Ryan handed me a credit card. "Stop spending so much," he said. I looked at him. "I haven't used your card in months." He frowned. "Then how are you paying for things?" I smiled. "My business." He laughed again. He had no idea how much it had grown, and he definitely didn't know about the letter sitting inside my desk drawer, a letter from a lawyer. A letter connected to the company he worked for. The letter had arrived 2 months earlier. It was from a lawyer named Margaret Lewis. I had never met her before. She explained that my late father had left me something unexpected. Not a house, not a bank account, shares in a private investment company. My father had quietly invested in several businesses before he died. One of them was Westbrook Development. I knew Ryan worked there, but I had never mentioned his name. Margaret told me the investment had grown significantly. Then she said something that shocked me. A group of investors was preparing to buy enough shares to control Westbrook. They wanted me to sell my shares. I refused. Instead, I asked Margaret one question. How much would it cost to buy the remaining shares? She gave me the number. It was enormous, but my father's investments had grown for years. I could afford it, so I started the process quietly. I didn't tell Ryan, not because I wanted revenge. At first, I simply wanted to protect something my father had left me. But then I discovered something disturbing. Westbrook's financial records showed unusual payments to a consulting company. The company was owned by Ryan's close friend, Derek. Ryan had approved several contracts with Derek's company. I asked Margaret to investigate. She found nothing illegal yet, but there was enough to make me nervous. Then, one evening, Ryan came home angry. "I'm going to be promoted soon," he announced. I smiled. "That's wonderful." He leaned closer. "And when that happens, I won't have to deal with your little business anymore." I didn't respond. He walked away. I opened my laptop. On the screen was the final acquisition document. I had just become the largest shareholder in Westbrook Development, but I still hadn't signed one final page. The next morning, Margaret came to my house. She brought the final documents. I read every page carefully. Then I signed. The acquisition was complete. I now controlled Westbrook Development, but there was one problem. Ryan still didn't know, and I didn't want him to find out from someone else, so I decided to tell him myself. That evening, I made dinner. Ryan barely looked at me. "I might have to travel next week," he said. "Where?" "New York, company meeting." I nodded, then I placed an envelope beside his plate. "What's this?" "Something you should read." He opened it. Inside was a copy of the ownership announcement. His eyes moved across the page, then stopped. He looked at me. "What is this?" I answered calmly. "Westbrook has a new controlling owner." "I know." "No," I said, "you don't." I turned the page toward him. My name was printed at the top. Ryan stared at it, then he laughed. "This is some kind of joke." "It's not. You couldn't possibly afford this. My father left me investments." He stood up. "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at him. "Because you never asked about my life." He went silent, then his phone rang. It was his boss, Richard. Ryan answered. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard Richard say, "Ryan, I need you at the office first thing Monday." Ryan hung up. "What did he want?" I asked. Ryan grabbed his jacket. "Nothing." He walked toward the door, then stopped. "Are you really the owner?" I looked at him. "Yes." He stared at me for several seconds. Then he whispered, "So what happens to me?" I smiled sadly. "That depends, Ryan." "On what?" "On what the investigation finds." Monday morning, Ryan arrived at Westbrook before everyone else. He expected to meet Richard privately. Instead, he walked into a conference room filled with senior managers. Richard was sitting at the head of the table. Beside him was Margaret, my lawyer. Ryan stopped. "Where's Natalie?" Richard looked at him calmly. "She won't be attending this meeting." Ryan relaxed. Then Richard continued, "Because she doesn't need to." Ryan frowned. Margaret opened a folder. "We've completed the preliminary financial review." She placed several contracts on the table. Every contract was connected to Derek's consulting company. Ryan stared at them. "I approved those." "We know," Margaret said, "but Derek told me they were legitimate." Richard looked at him. "Did you ever verify the work?" Ryan said nothing. Then Margaret showed them the payment records. The company had paid Derek nearly $400,000 over 18 months. Several invoices described work that had never been completed. Ryan's face changed. "I didn't know." Richard leaned forward. "That's exactly what we're investigating." Ryan suddenly looked toward Margaret. "Where is Natalie?" "At home." "She knew about this?" Margaret paused. "She discovered the irregularities before you did." Ryan looked stunned. For years, he had called my work a hobby. Now my bookkeeping records had uncovered a problem inside his company. That afternoon, I received a call from Richard. He told me Ryan had been suspended pending the investigation. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I asked one question. "Did you find out who actually created those false invoices?" Richard was silent for a moment. "Yes." Then he said a name I wasn't expecting. Ryan. I couldn't speak for several seconds. "Ryan?" Richard explained that some of the earliest invoices had been created using Ryan's company login, but that didn't prove he was stealing. Someone could have used his credentials, so Margaret checked the access records. The login had been used from Ryan's office computer. I felt sick. Not because I wanted Ryan punished, because I suddenly wondered how much of our marriage had been built on lies. That evening, Ryan came home. He didn't yell. He didn't insult me. He simply stood in the doorway. "Did you know?" I looked at him. "Know what? About Derek?" "I suspected something. You should have told me." I almost laughed. "Would you have listened?" He looked away. I continued. "You called my work a hobby. You told your friends I was worthless. You never wanted my opinion." Ryan sat down. For the first time, he looked embarrassed. "I was wrong." "Yes," he rubbed his face. "I didn't create those invoices." "I believe you." He looked up. "You do?" "I believe you didn't create them." Then I added, "But I don't know if you helped hide them." His expression changed. That reaction told me more than his words. The next morning, Margaret found another document. It was an email from Ryan to Derek. The email was dated 8 months earlier. Ryan had written, "Keep the consulting payments off the main report. I'll handle the questions." My heart sank. He hadn't created the scheme, but he had helped conceal it. I asked Margaret what would happen. She said the investigation would determine that. Then she told me something else. "There's one more person involved." "Who?" She placed a printed email on my desk. The sender was Ryan's direct supervisor, and the message suggested the supervisor knew everything. Suddenly, this wasn't just about my husband. It was much bigger than that. The investigation continued for another 2 weeks. During that time, Ryan moved into a hotel. He didn't ask me to take him back. He didn't even ask me to protect his job. That surprised me. One evening, he called. "I want to tell you the truth." I listened. Ryan admitted that Derek had approached him months earlier. He told Ryan the consulting contracts were a way to move company expenses around. Ryan knew something wasn't right, but Derek promised him a promotion. So Ryan stayed quiet. Then the supervisor became involved. He was the one who approved the larger payments. Ryan had only helped hide the paperwork. It didn't excuse him, but it explained why he had been so desperate to keep me away from his work. I asked him, "Did you ever think about telling me?" "Every day." "Then why didn't you?" He was quiet. "Because I was ashamed." That answer hurt more than an angry confession would have. A few days later, the investigation ended. Derek and the supervisor were fired and referred to authorities. Ryan wasn't charged with stealing, but he was removed from management for helping conceal the transactions. His career was badly damaged. Then Richard called me. "The board wants you to become chairwoman." I was shocked. "I don't have experience running a construction company." "You have something more important," he said. "You know how to recognize when numbers don't make sense." I accepted. On my first day as chairwoman, I walked into the same conference room where Ryan had once bragged about his promotion. Everyone stood. Richard smiled. Then he handed me a folder. Inside was Ryan's resignation letter. I read it quietly. He had written only 3 sentences. I accept responsibility for my choices. I am sorry for what I did to Natalie, and I hope one day she can forgive me. I closed the folder, but I wasn't ready to forgive him yet. 3 months passed. Westbrook began recovering. We canceled the questionable contracts, hired an independent accounting team, and rebuilt trust with our clients. For the first time, I wasn't just protecting my father's investment. I was building something of my own. Then, one afternoon, Ryan asked to meet me. We sat in a quiet cafe. He looked different. No expensive watch. No confident smile. Just a tired man sitting across from me. I won't ask you to take me back, he said. Good. He gave a small smile. I deserve that. I looked at him carefully. What do you want? To apologize. He told me he had started working for a small contractor. The job paid much less than Westbrook, but he said he was finally learning how to earn people's trust instead of demanding it. Then he pulled something from his pocket, my old wedding ring. I stared at it. I found it in your desk, he said. I kept it because I couldn't throw it away. I didn't take it. Ryan nodded. I understand. He stood up. Before leaving, he said, You were never worthless, Natalie. I looked at him. I know. That was the first time I said it without hesitation. He walked away. And for some reason, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt free. But that wasn't the end of the story. Because the next morning, Richard called me. There's been an offer to buy Westbrook. I frowned. From whom? He gave me the name. It was a company owned by Derek's former business partner, the same man who had helped create the consulting scheme, and he was offering almost double the company's value. I immediately refused the offer. Richard asked why. Because I don't trust the person making it. We investigated. 2 days later, Margaret discovered something disturbing. The buyer wasn't interested in Westbrook's construction projects. They wanted our client contracts. If they bought the company, they could access years of valuable business information. It was a trap. We rejected the offer publicly. Then something unexpected happened. The buyer withdrew. But before leaving, they sent me a letter. It contained one sentence. Your father would have sold. I stared at those words. Nobody outside my family knew enough about my father's investments to say that. I called Margaret. She investigated the sender. The letter had been written by someone who had worked with my father years earlier. His name was Thomas. He explained that my father had once refused to sell Westbrook because he believed the company could become something bigger. Then he told me something I never knew. My father planned to give me control one day, I said. Thomas nodded. He wanted you to learn how to protect what he built. That hit me harder than I expected. My father hadn't simply left me money, he had left me responsibility. That evening, I returned to my office. I opened the red folder containing his original investment documents. At the bottom was a handwritten note. I had seen it before, but I had never understood it. It said, never confuse being underestimated with being powerless. I started crying, because suddenly I understood why I had stayed quiet for so long. I wasn't weak. I had simply forgotten my own strength. And then my phone rang. It was Ryan. He had one final thing to tell me. Ryan told me he had received an offer from another construction company. They wanted him as a project manager. I thought you might want to know, he said. I smiled. That's good. I almost rejected it. Why? Because I thought you might think I hadn't changed. I shook my head. Ryan, your life isn't mine to control. There was silence. Then he said, I finally understand that. We said goodbye, and that was the last time we spoke as husband and wife. Our divorce was finalized a few months later. I kept the company. Ryan kept his new job. Derek and the supervisor faced the consequences of their actions. Nobody got a magical happy ending, but everyone finally had to live with the truth. A year later, Westbrook was stronger than it had ever been. I expanded the company, created a proper financial oversight department, and started a scholarship in my father's name. Sometimes people ask me what my greatest revenge was. It wasn't taking control of Westbrook. It wasn't watching Ryan lose his position. And it wasn't proving his family wrong. My greatest revenge was much simpler. I stopped believing the version of me that Ryan had created. The woman he called worthless became the woman running the company he once bragged about. But I never needed him to see it. That was the real victory. Because one evening, I stood alone in my office after everyone had gone home. I looked at my father's photograph on the desk and whispered, You were right, Dad. I wasn't powerless. I had simply been waiting for someone else to tell me I mattered. Now I knew better.